In the early 1990s, the video game industry existed within a rigid cultural ghetto that viewed interactive entertainment strictly as a domestic toy category for young children. This paradigm was guarded by Nintendo and Sega, who fought a bitter duopoly for the hearts of adolescents through colourful cartoon mascots and pixelated side-scrolling adventures. Nintendo cultivated a wholesome corporate image where strict censorship was common practice, and third-party developers faced draconian agreements. Sega attempted to disrupt this by styling itself as the cooler alternative, yet their efforts still targeted the teenage demographic. Neither incumbent recognised that millions of children who grew up with 8-bit consoles were rapidly outgrowing the medium's childish framing, creating a massive consumer vacuum for sophisticated digital entertainment that treated players with mature respect. Sony's entry into this arena was born not from an organic desire to make games, but out of a fierce sense of corporate betrayal and technological pride. In the late 1980s, Sony partnered with Nintendo to develop a CD-ROM drive add-on for the Super Nintendo, a hybrid machine dubbed the PlayStation. However, at the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show, Nintendo publicly shattered the alliance by abandoning Sony to form a rival partnership with Philips. This public humiliation left Sony's executive tier furious, with many demanding a complete withdrawal from the interactive space. Yet a visionary engineer named Ken Kutaragi fiercely defended the project, convincing Sony's leadership to channel their engineering prowess and resentment into creating an independent console that would fundamentally dismantle Nintendo's dominance, shifting the project into a campaign for industrial vengeance. Preparing for the global launch of the standalone PlayStation in the mid-1990s, Sony's marketing executives recognized that attempting to outcompete Nintendo on its own turf would be commercial futility. Instead of chasing children, Sony executed a brilliant demographic pivot, aiming their product squarely at the emerging 20-something generation and college students who were drifting away from traditional media. To capture this media-savvy audience, Sony completely discarded the industry's established playbook of technical specifications or friendly animated protagonists. Sony realized that to appeal to a generation raised on counterculture cynicism, they needed to strip away the plastic toy connotations of the video game console and reframe it as an edgy, premium lifestyle appliance that felt like a natural extension of adult nightlife. The initial North American marketing campaign in 1995 perfectly encapsulated this psychological warfare by deploying an enigmatic, cryptic teaser strategy designed to generate intense word-of-mouth intrigue.
Months before hardware arrived, mysterious billboards appeared across major urban centres, featuring the bizarre, unexplained phrase, "Enos lives." This cryptic message left audiences bewildered until it was revealed to be a typographic riddle. The red bracketed letter played on the word ready, while the letters NOS served as a countdown to the console's launch date of September 9, 1995. Once established, Sony transitioned this campaign into its iconic slogan, "You are not Red E." By telling their audience they were not psychologically prepared for the PlayStation, Sony masterfully weaponized reverse psychology, transforming a consumer purchase into a status symbol of cultural readiness. This psychological posturing was backed by a monumental technological shift, as the PlayStation abandoned traditional silicon ROM cartridges in favor of the compact disc. For a decade, the prohibitive manufacturing costs and limited storage of plastic cartridges throttled developers, restricting them to low-resolution sprites and compressed audio. The CD-ROM obliterated these barriers by offering over 500 megabytes of storage at a fraction of the production cost. This vast digital canvas allowed full-motion cinematic videos, pre-rendered three-dimensional environments, and studio-quality soundtracks. Crucially, the low cost of stamping CDs shifted the economic power dynamics of the industry away from platform holders and towards third-party creators, enabling Sony to offer highly favourable licensing terms that shattered Nintendo's historic monopoly. In Europe, Sony took this counterculture philosophy further by embedding the PlayStation directly into the continent's thriving underground rave and electronic music scenes. Marketing teams completely bypassed traditional toy stores, opting instead to set up custom PlayStation experiential kiosks inside late-night nightclubs, alternative fashion boutiques, and massive outdoor festivals like Glastonbury and the Ministry of Sound. They recognised that the hyperkinetic nature of early 3D gaming shared a profound aesthetic synergy with the pulsating energy of 1990s youth culture. By positioning the console alongside strobe lights, electronic beats, and late-night adult socialising, Sony successfully decoupled video games from the suburban living room, placing the hardware at the absolute epicentre of urban cool and ensuring ownership carried immense cultural prestige. This symbiotic relationship reached its artistic zenith through Sony's close collaboration with the British development studio Psygnosis on the landmark futuristic racing game Wipeout. Rather than relying on traditional game artists, Psygnosis hired the Designers Republic, a highly influential graphic design collective famous for their avant-garde, anti-establishment aesthetic in the techno-music scene. The studio wrapped Wipeout in a sleek, hyper-stylized visual language filled with cryptic iconography and minimalist typography that looked completely alien to the gaming landscape of 1995.
This radical design was paired with an unprecedented licensed soundtrack featuring the biggest names in electronic music, including The Prodigy, The Chemical Brothers, and Orbital. When players booted up the game, they were greeted by a relentless, bass-heavy assault of cutting-edge club music, cementing the PlayStation's status as a definitive curator of contemporary youth culture. To maintain this intense momentum, Sony leveraged the cheap manufacturing costs of the CD format to pioneer an unprecedented community engagement tool known as the PlayStation Underground and the widespread distribution of interactive demo discs. During the cartridge era, consumers relied almost entirely on static magazine screenshots to judge a game. Sony revolutionized this by binding playable compilation discs directly onto the covers of gaming publications and launching a premium disc-based subscription magazine. These demo discs allowed millions of players to directly experience the visceral thrill of real-time 3D graphics and polygon rendering from the comfort of their homes before committing to a full purchase. This strategy drastically lowered the barrier to entry for experimental genres and fostered an intimate dialogue that transformed passive consumers into active community participants. The structural dominance Sony was building came to a dramatic head during the inaugural Electronic Entertainment Expo in May 1995, culminating in one of the most ruthless acts of corporate theatre in history. Sega, sensing the immense threat, attempted a desperate preemptive strike during their morning keynote presentation, announcing that their 32-bit Sega Saturn console would launch immediately at select retail locations for a premium price of $399. This surprise launch was intended to catch Sony completely off guard. Hours later, during Sony's afternoon press conference, head of SCEA Steve Reese walked calmly up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, uttered a single devastating phrase, $299, and walked off the stage. By undercutting Sega by a massive $100 before their console had even officially arrived, Sony effectively killed the Sega Saturn at birth and established a commanding economic advantage. As the console entered the twilight of the century, Sony's European campaigns grew increasingly avant-garde, deliberately pushing the boundaries of psychological comfort to maintain their edgy artistic mystique. This experimental ethos was perfectly manifested in the legendary 1999 Mental Wealth television commercial, directed by video artist and Aphex Twin collaborator Chris Cunningham. The advertisement featured a static, unsettling close-up shot of a Scottish teenager with digitally altered wide-set alien eyes who delivered a hypnotic monologue on evolutionary superiority and the power of the human mind.
The commercial was so visually jarring that thousands of viewers genuinely believed they were witnessing a real genetic anomaly, generating a massive wave of cultural shock. This calculated use of psychological disorientation established a definitive corporate blueprint for unsettling anti-advertising that Sony would aggressively double down on during the turn of the millennium, famously hiring surrealist filmmaker David Lynch to direct promotional films for the subsequent launch of the PlayStation 2. Perhaps the most sociologically significant milestone of this marketing apparatus was the release of the multi-award-winning Double Life commercial, a piece of promotional media that completely redefined how society conceptualized the act of play. The advertisement featured a diverse, rapidly cut montage of everyday individuals directly addressing the camera to deliver a powerful, poetic monologue detailing their secret, epic digital exploits. They proudly confessed to commanding vast interstellar fleets, conquering empires, committing spectacular acts of athletic brilliance, and surviving impossible horrors, all while maintaining a quiet, unremarkable exterior in the physical world. The brilliant subtext of the commercial was a direct, profound validation of the gamer's internal life, framing the act of playing a video game not as a symptom of antisocial regression or childish escapism, but as an enriching, deeply empowering democratization of human experience. It explicitly told an entire generation of adults that their digital lives possessed genuine narrative meaning and psychological weight, permanently erasing the lingering social stigma associated with interactive entertainment. This comprehensive cultural and economic realignment inevitably triggered a massive systemic migration of critical third-party development talent away from historical market leaders and into the Sony ecosystem. The most catastrophic blow to Nintendo's legacy hegemony occurred when the legendary Japanese developer Squaresoft made the decision to abandon Nintendo's upcoming 64-bit console and develop their flagship role-playing title, Final Fantasy VII, exclusively for the PlayStation. Squaresoft's visionary directors openly stated that the spatial limitations of Nintendo's insistence on expensive ROM cartridges made it mathematically impossible to realize their narrative ambitions, which required gigabytes of data to store pre-rendered cinematic backgrounds and intricate orchestral arrangements. When Final Fantasy VII launched on 3 separate PlayStation compact discs in 1997, its unprecedented cinematic scope, mature storytelling, and massive global commercial success proved to the entire software development community that the future of interactive entertainment belonged entirely to the CD format and the mature, uninhibited ecosystem that Sony had meticulously constructed. Ultimately, the historic triumph of the original PlayStation, which went on to become the first console in video game history to cross the monumental threshold of 100 million units sold worldwide, was not merely a victory of superior silicon or raw processing speeds.
It was a triumph of profound sociological foresight, structural economic disruption, and an uncompromised commitment to mature lifestyle marketing. By understanding that a generation of consumers had outgrown the childish paradigms of the 8-bit and 16-bit eras, Sony successfully elevated an entire interactive medium out of the toy aisle and integrated it permanently into the broader fabric of modern adult culture. They proved conclusively that the most effective way to conquer a legacy market dominated by entrenched historic monopolies is to fundamentally reframe the rules of engagement, transforming a plastic electronic appliance into an essential icon of psychological rebellion, contemporary art, and adult identity. The sophisticated multi-billion-dollar global entertainment landscape that exists today is a direct cultural descendant of that brief radical moment in the mid-1990s when Sony boldly declared that the world simply was not ready.